Once upon a time,
in a land far away.
I'm Katrina.
And I'm Geoff.
This is the Storytellers podcast.
Myth, legend, folklore, fable.
We explore what they say about cultures then and now,
Grab a hot cup of cocoa and a comfy seat
while we tell you a tale.
Welcome back to the podcast. So excited to have you here with us for, you guessed it, another exciting episode.
Yay! Not another one.
Yeah. I don't know if we can keep doing this.
Yeah, there's no possible way that they can all be so.
We need some levels. We need
exciting.
Some that are, a little more down, a little more chill, mellow, relaxed. Then the excitement can really stand out. When they're all exciting, none of them are exciting, you know?
Yeah, that's true. We've got to make a couple of dud episodes. You know what? I think we can.
I think, you know what? I think maybe we have. Please don't let us know. I can't remember how many we had before, but we now have over 100 ratings on Spotify.
Nice.
And that's exciting.
You're like, they're all ones, but...
No, it seems like they're pretty good. I mean, we've got a 4.7.
Nice.
Average rating across those 107, which I think is respectable.
Yeah.
Like, there's over twice as many reviews on Spotify than we have on Apple Podcasts. Sad thing about Spotify, as I've bemoaned many a time here, is that they don't have like the text that we can read reviews. They just have a star number.
Yeah.
And we haven't gotten any new reviews that have text with them on Apple Podcasts in a while. But whether you can leave a text review or not, please, if you have not yet already and you like and enjoy our podcast, go and rate us those 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever other podcatcher that you may be using to listen to this fantastic, exciting show, because it makes us happy.
And if you are leaving comments on the Spotify episodes themselves, I might see them and reply to them.
That's right. Yeah, you can comment on on individual episodes, which is so weird, but
because I've recently, as I've been like kind of doing more to like find some of these like other episodes or like old episodes that we've done to like link them or compare them to other like episodes. I've been like scrolling through them, and then I've seen like, oh, someone left a comment on the Spotify, like, and I'm like, what? So I'll like click on it. And somebody is like, oh, 3 months ago, somebody said this. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. And then I'm like, if I reply, are they going to get like an email or something or a notification through their Spotify app I don't know. I don't know how it works. It's all a mystery to me. Every morning that I wake up is a fantastic new puzzle to solve.
Beautiful. That was poetic. I like that.
Ooh. So today we're going to kind of get back into our little academic study of fairy tales that we've been doing and enjoying. And this one is slightly off the beaten path of the curriculum that we were looking at and using, but not too terribly far off. It's going to be a discussion of our fairy tales supposed to teach a moral? And if they do teach a moral, is it a good one? Maybe some of these questions will be answered in the discussion. Maybe not.
They'll definitely be asked.
Yes. Guaranteed.
I can guarantee that right now.
Yep. So inside of the book, Teaching Fairy Tales, edited by Nancy L. Canepa, we've been getting the sample curriculum out of by Linda Krause Worley. There's also collections of like different essays by different professors about like teaching specific things to students and like focusing things that like professors could focus on as they're teaching about fairy tales. And we've used one of those in the past, definitely for sure, when we did our episode on disabilities studies. We used a essay that was in there. Today we're going to be looking at Morals and Miracles, the case of ATU 555, the Fisherman and His Wife. So I loved that I could throw in an angel number
Yeah, 555.
Just for you, Geoff.
Amazing.
And that is by Victoria Somov, not The Fisherman and His Wife. That's not by them, but this essay inside of the book, Teaching Fairy Tales. The Fisherman and His Wife is a tale that is recorded in The Brothers Grimm. So this essay kind of starts off talking. I mean, all of them are like geared towards talking towards like the professor about like how they're going to teach their students or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so it starts off talking about this dilemma of your students come into class and they are like, oh, here's what I know about fairy tales. Fairy tales are magical stories that teach children morals and teach them lessons that parents want them to know. It says, it's not surprising that college students whose experience of fairy tales comes precisely from children's anthologies firmly associate fairy tales with morality. And I've encountered kind of a similar phenomenon with the podcast where we've talked about like fairy tales do not have to and rarely do have any kind of like clear-cut moral. Of course, I'm not talking about like Charles Perrault. Like at the end of his is like, here's what we learned from the story. There definitely is a case for like in stories like that for like, does the tale teach that? Which in past episodes, we've kind of answered that question by looking at it being like, no, the story of Bluebeard does not actually connect with the moral of like women ruin everything by being too curious. And it's like, that's not what the story taught. What are you talking about, my man? But anyway, so there are obviously like children anthologies like that by Charles Perrault, where he was like had those stories that were geared towards talking to children and wanting parents, because again, in past episodes, we've talked about what his motivations were in doing that. But fairy tales don't have to have this and really do not have these like clear cut like morals to them. Because even the tales that are like The Kind and the Unkind Sister, there's definitely some nuance missing in those stories or kind of like specific virtues that they're trying to teach are not necessarily like very clear cut. It does show us like culturally kind of like what people valued in women, which was usually like sewing, domesticity, stuff like that. So the issue that I have run into is the same issue that this author was running into of even after you've kind of said to people that like, oh, there's not a like moral. They're not moralistic tales. That's not their thing. Fairy tales aren't moralistic tales. They're still like, sure, okay, whatever. But what was the moral in that story? When they like will read another story, I will like get to the end of like telling a story and somebody will say to me, wow, that was crazy. What is the moral of that even supposed to be? And it's like, it's not. The bird just murdered everybody. Did you get something out of that besides like, that was a hilarious ride? Like, no. Because even in stories we've talked about with like tricksters where they're getting away with doing kind of like diabolical stuff, the moral of the story is not like, and if you do diabolical stuff and end up winning in the end, then you're fully justified in doing whatever horrible thing. Like, no, in that case, you know, there's like that psychological element of like the wish fulfillment thing of like, oh, it's satisfying to see this character rise up and defeat something that was bigger than them and end up like on top through trickery and wit and stuff. It's fun to watch, but we're not saying like, and we'd root for anybody who did that. So it is interesting when like, no matter how much I kind of like say that like they don't have morals or they're not moralistic tales, that's not what their purpose is or like what they're supposed to like be doing, there's still a lot of that pushback. And so inside this essay, the author Victoria Somov is trying to explain how she uses the ATU type 555 to teach her students, have them walk through different variants of these stories so that they can see for themselves, to break down for themselves, like, does this story have really a moral?
Mm-hmm.
Is it really trying to teach the thing that you might think that it is trying to teach? Or is it a little more complicated than that? And I thought the way that she broke it down was extremely clever. I doubt I'm going to reach that same level of cleverness in what we're going to be doing today, mostly because, like, in the written form, you can write very clearly and very succinctly. And I'm just out here spitballing ideas with my friend Geoff while we
Yeah.
record this episode. But we are going to be retelling 2 of the 4 tales that she uses to teach her students, because I was like, 4 tales seems a little excessive for Geoff and I in this episode. It'll end up being like a 3-hour long episode.
Yeah. And listeners / students, those other 2 stories are for you to go and read on your own as homework
Yes.
and apply what we have spoken about in this podcast episode to your analysis of those tales. And we expect a 5,000 word essay on our Instagram DMs by the end of next week.
Yep. Chop, chop. And
Rude.
do you know what's funny? So I'm going to be retelling the story of the Fisherman and His Wife, the one that the ATU is named after.
The titular tale.
The titular tale that can be found in the complete fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm. And it's funny because when I went to get out this like reference to look at it, I had a note in here that says similar to the Traitor and the Genie, because at one point I had considered saving like this tale for one of our 1001 Night episodes.
Oh.
And I did not end up needing it, or like it didn't come together the way that I wanted to. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, that'll be a someday. I'll retell this story someday. And so it was funny because when I was thinking about planning this episode, I was like, I could have sworn that we had already done an episode on the Fishman and His Wife, but but it was because I had been like planning it in my head and then never did it. So I guess this story's been a long time coming as well. So there was once a fisherman who lived with his wife in a nasty little hovel near the sea. So what's funny about me saying nasty little hovel is that the phrase apparently in the German translated to piss pot.
Oh, nice.
And so apparently there's like translators have always kind of tried to figure out a better way.
A better way to say
just,
they lived in a piss pot by the sea.
Yeah. Especially because like this story
we don't have a term in English for like that piss pot is like a term that you use to describe like a rundown hovel. It's
yeah,
like,
that it's not. Yeah,
like they're like they literally lived in like a, what are those things, like a chamber pot?
A chamber.
Like,
they
what?
literally lived in a chamber pot. Yeah, it's not a colloquialism like in our language. And also because like usually when they were writing, because this story does get made into children's books to like be turned into like picture books like for children.
Right.
And so when they're trying to be like, how do we accurately, what do we use? The word in the German is piss pot. But no, nasty little hole, dirty hovel. Oh, there's also slut house, which again, I can't remember if we've covered this on like in a bonus episode or if
we have
this
talked about
episode.
it somewhere.
But the term slut used, or things being slutty, used to mean that they were like dirty and just like run down and gross, which I'm going to let you figure out how that made the hop to describing a woman.
So, because what wasn't there? What
there
character,
is
like the main character is like little cinder slut or something like that.
Yes. Right? Yeah. That is I think it's a Greek variant on Cinderella, and it is the saddle slut.
Saddle slut. That's right. Which we have told on this podcast.
No, we've told it in a bonus episode.
On a bonus episode of this podcast.
Which is actually an episode that I really, really liked just because the story does not end the way that a Cinderella story normally ends. So it's actually very interesting. Not trying to force anyone to go for
but go
Patreon,
to our Patreon and support us, and you get access to a bunch of really fun bonus episodes. Because if you've been listening to this podcast for a long time, I'm always like, oh yeah, that's like that really great episode that we did this time. And Katrina's like, that was a bonus episode. And I'm not doing it on purpose to drum up support on Patreon. I just remember only bonus episodes, apparently.
they do tend to be unlike, there's some pretty like random or off topic stuff, because there was like one time where we did like an episode that was on the Abbasid dynasty, and like the way that I like told it was as if like we were watching or like having a hot gossip session about like the rise and fall of this like medieval, like this is like from like the 12th century or something like that.
That was a good one.
Yeah. And so I'm like, I think about those like random stories. But anyway, so Dirty Hovel, it's a piss pot near the sea.
A slut house by the sea.
A slut house by the sea. There's a Sesame Street song that you just reminded me of where there's like, sometimes I imagine that I would like to be a knight in shining armor with a slut house by the sea.
I don't remember that part of it.
Oh, okay. Elmo and Grover never said that. I can't remember if it was Elmo singing or if it was Grover singing, but I think it was, or was it Ernie? Somebody looked it up.
I think it was Ernie. Doesn't matter.
I loved that.
As usual,
song.
we're like 5 minutes into the story and one sentence.
Yeah, literally.
One clause into the story after 5 minutes.
I'm just like, once upon a time, there was a nasty house. No, fisherman lived with his wife in this house. So every day the fisherman went out to fish, because that is what fishermen do. They go out and they fish and they fish and fish. That's, their job. So one day he was sitting with his line, just gazing out into the water. And all he did was sit and sit and sit. There wasn't a whole lot of things getting bit that day. So he was just sitting, staring out. But suddenly, his line sank down and it went really, really, really deep, 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 deep down to the bottom. And he pulled and he pulled and he pulled and he pulled. He was fighting for his life, trying to get this fish back. He was like, I caught something good. It's finally happened for me. So,
a great day to be a fisherman.
Indeed. And he pulled up a large flounder on the line, which, I don't know if people know this. Flounders live on the bottom of the water. So I don't quite understand how his line got pulled down to the bottom by something and then bit. I don't know. Flounders are bottom feeders. Mm-hmm. They don't look like Ariel's friend.
No, because they have their eyes on the one side of their body.
Yeah, they're little
and
freaky
they taste
things.
Delicious.
Yum, yum. So, but anyway, he pulled the flounder up on the line, and the flounder said to him, "Listen here, fisherman, I beg you, let me live. I'm not a real flounder, but an enchanted prince." Sure, buddy. That's what they all say. And so he said, "Would it really benefit you to kill me? I certainly wouldn't taste very good." What, you think princes don't taste as good as flounders? Especially if you're a prince that's been enchanted to look like a flounder, I'm sure you've been enchanted to taste like a flounder.
Yeah.
Sorry to poke holes in that flounder's logic. He's floundering. Someone had to make it the joke. Anyway, so he's like, "Put me back in the water, let me go." And the guy was like, "Okay, wait, hold on. Don't have to waste your words on me. I would have thrown a talking fish back into the water regardless." He was like, "You had me at listen here, fisherman."
As a rule, I don't eat anything that I can have a conversation with.
Yeah, it's like, don't worry. I immediately just wanted to scream and throw up. It doesn't matter if you're a prince or not. I freaked out of my mind. Get away from me. Anyway, so he put the fish back into the water and the flounder swam away and said, leaving a long streak of blood, which slightly unnecessary. We didn't need to know that he had been harmed, even though they do get harmed when in catch and release. So
you've got a hook through your mouth.
Yeah. When you get a hook in your mouth, it does cause damage. Anyway, but he put the fish back into the water and it swam away. So then the fisherman stood up in his boat, I guess, and rowed back to shore and went back to the hovel to be with his wife. Back to the piss pot. And his wife was like, "Hey, did you catch anything today?" And he was like, "No, I just caught a flounder, but he said he was an enchanted prince, so I just let him go." And the wife was like, "What? Wait, what? He was enchanted? Did you ask him for a favor or a wish, or like, did you even do anything?" Which I love that she like immediately like thought like,
no, he was the one that was enchanted, not that he can do magic.
Well, it's no
maybe
harm.
Who knows?
No harm in asking.
I mean, if I caught a talking fish, I also would probably think that it was magical, not magicked, you know?
Mm,
Except for the fact that he told me.
yeah. But what if there are two flounders and one always lies and one always tells the truth? And he was lying. Anyway, so the wife was like, "Didn't you wish for anything?" And the husband was like, "No, I didn't. What would I have wished for?" And she was like, "What? Are you kidding me? Don't you look around you, man? Don't you think it's awful that we live in like a literal chamber pot? A literal piss pot? Like, we live in a disgusting hovel. It is nasty. It stinks here. You could have wished that we lived in a cottage. Like, for starters, you could have just,
Yeah.
thought about slightly improving your living situation. Go
Or a
back.
condo in Boca Raton.
Yeah. It's worth asking.
Yeah. Worst he can say is no.
The worst thing they could say is blah, blah.
And the most likely.
Yeah. Thank you for laughing at that dumb joke.
I loved it.
Okay, so after getting it yelled at by his wife, this guy, he paddles back out to sea. And do you know what?
What?
As I'm reading through this, I'm realizing right now that it never says that he was in a boat. He's just standing by the
He
shore.
was fishing from the shore.
He's fishing from the shore. Every time I've seen this as a picture book, he's in a boat.
Not all fishermen need to be in
Yeah.
boats.
And so
Here's the thing, too.
I put him in a boat in my mind.
Yeah. It makes sense because if he has enough money for a boat, he could potentially have enough money to not be living in a literal piss pot.
Yeah.
You know? It really like doubles down on the theme to have him on foot.
Yeah. That he doesn't even have a boat to his name. So anyway, nobody imagine him in a boat. Everyone stop.
Also, did it say... Oh, no, it did because it pulled his
Stop
line.
Stop imagining him in a boat. What?
Because I was thinking, did he even have like a fishing rod, or did he have like a net? Because like a net is probably more expensive than like a...
Yeah. It did say that he had a line.
Yeah.
That he would sit with his line. You're like, he doesn't even have a stick.
Yeah.
I hope he does. I hope he at least has a stick. But anyway, going back with this revised picture in our minds, he was like, all right, I'll go back out to the sea and see like what I can do. So it says the man really did not want to go, but neither did he want to oppose his wife. He was scared. Yeah. So he went back to the sea, and when he got there, the sea was looking, it says green and yellow. It was no longer the clear sea that he had seen earlier in the day. And he stood on the shore and he said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea. If you're a man, then speak to me. Though I do not care for my wife's request, I've come to ask it nonetheless."
At least he's honest.
Yeah. He was like, "Oh, I have to do this in rhyme or else it won't be magical. But what else do I have to say besides, fish, can you come back? I have to talk to you about something." So the flounder came swimming right up to him and was like, "Well, what does your wife want?" Which I love. Love that this fish is kind of like a little bit of a busybody. He's like, "Wait, what? What does your wife want with me?" And the guy was like, "Oh, so my wife thinks that I should have wished for something or like asked you for something because I caught you and then I like threw you back. So she wanted me to like ask you something. She doesn't want to live in the hovel that we live in anymore. She wants to live in like a cottage, if that's like something you could do, maybe like because I caught you and I threw you back and you're enchanted. Is that maybe something that you can do?" And the flounder is like, "Oh yeah, just go home. She's already got it." And the fisherman was like, "Oh, okay." So the fisherman turns around, he starts walking back over to where his piss pot used to be. And his wife was no longer standing in this, like, disgusting hovel. Instead, she was sitting on a beautiful bench that was sitting in front of the door of a little cottage. And his wife just grabbed him by the hand and was like, "Come inside. Look, isn't this so much better than what we had before? Aren't you so glad that you went and you asked that fish for your wish?" And I do want to say, this lady is not totally off base in terms of like fairy tale lore and whatnot. Mm-hmm. There is a long history of superstition, mythology, lore about that if you catch a magical creature, that if you catch something specifically in the ocean, if you catch this like magical thing, then you get a wish or a request
Something
or
in return.
something. Because there's a lot of that with like mermaids as well, or like mermen. Basically, if you catch anything funky in your net and you chuck it back in the water, you're allowed to make a little request for something. And so, in terms of fairy tale lore and story lore, she's not totally off base for, being like, oh no, go back to him. He owes us something. So they went inside the house and it was really, really beautiful. It says it had a nice little hallway, which I love the fanciness of the idea of a hallway. And if you think about it, a hallway is very fancy, considering that means they're not living in like
a single
room, like all purpose utility hut, where it's like kitchen, sleeping area, living area, like all one place. Like if you, there's a hallway, which means that there's areas that have specific tasks, rooms that are for specific tasks, which again, that's pretty fancy.
I'd say.
Yeah, if you've got a hallway in your house leading to rooms that have specific purposes, you're doing pretty good.
Doing pretty good.
Yeah. And so there was like a splendid parlor and a bedroom. Ooh, bedroom. There was also a kitchen and a pantry that was furnished with lots of like dishware, utensils, tin and brass, anything that somebody could possibly need. And then behind the cottage was a little yard with chickens and ducks and a garden with vegetables and fruit, which, listen.
Man, yeah, that flounder went above and beyond the request.
He asked for a cottage.
Absolutely.
And this guy's like, how about mature fruit trees? Dang, what I wouldn't do for some mature fruit trees in my yard. Are you kidding me?
I'm going to give you something that you didn't even know that you wanted to ask for.
Yeah, dang.
That's some good service.
Yeah, we need to grab that fish.
And then set it free.
Yes, that's the key, the important part. So yeah, his wife was very much like, you see, this is why you need to follow my instructions and what I tell you to do. You're letting people step all over you. She's giving real like Lady Macbeth vibes in this story. Just that idea of just very much like, see, behind every successful man is a strong woman, and you need to believe in me and do what I tell you to do. So they made something in their brand new kitchen to eat, and then they went to bed. And everything was going really well for a couple of weeks, enjoying their brand new house, their new living situation, everything, including, seriously, like, I cannot say enough about like the like poultry that they had in the backyard and like vegetables and fruit. That that's really monetarily wise, like really putting you up there. Because there's such thing as being house rich and like
yeah, I mean, they asked for a cottage. It could have been an empty cottage. Yeah. With like in the middle of a barren field. But no.
Yeah. They're like set up for like, this is a leg up for them. And one that, it's like if you teach a man to fish. Like, you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish and then release that fish and he'll eat the rest of his life.
Exactly.
As the old saying goes. Anyway, so everything was going fine for like the next couple of weeks, enjoying their new like station in life, really. And the wife goes to her husband and she's like, so listen, husband, this cottage is getting really, really cramped. And the yard and garden are really too small for, the household that we have, the upkeep that we need like a much bigger garden. That flounder could have given us a much bigger house. So I would like it if you could go down to the water and get that flounder and tell him that when we said we wanted like a bigger house, like we meant like a castle. That's what I want. We want like a castle. That would be big enough for us. And the husband was like, oh, no, I think the cottage is really nice. The cottage is good enough for us. Like, why should we want to live in a castle? Like, what good would a castle do people like you and I? And she's like, oh my goodness, why do you always want to argue with me? Just go back to the flounder. The flounder could do all of that, like, without any trouble to him. So just ask him. Like, it's not going to hurt him, so just go ask. Which I'm like, she doesn't know that. She doesn't know how hard it is for him to magic a castle. Rude.
That's true.
Anyway, so The husband getting bugged and bugged by his wife. He doesn't want to go, and he's just like, it just doesn't seem right. But nevertheless, he went, and when he got to the sea, it says the water was purple, dark blue, gray, and dense. But it was still calm, which I'm like, we're gauging the mood of this magical entity by the color of the water, I guess, the calmness thereof. So he stood there, he said, Flounder, flounder in the sea, if you're a man, then speak to me, though I do not care for my wife's request. I've come to ask it none the less. And so the flounder immediately pops up and is like, well, what does she want? And the man was like, well, I hate to ask this, but she wants to live in a great stone castle. And the flounder is like, all right, yeah, just go home. She's already standing at the gate. And so the man turned around and started walking, and he thought he was, walking back to where his cottage had been, where his piss pot had been. And as he approached the spot where it used to be, instead he found this great stone palace, and his wife was standing on the steps about to go in, and she took him by the hand and was like, come inside with me. So regal. So they went in and they found, again, big front hall, marble floors, servants inside of the castle, who were opening the doors for them. The walls were brightly colored and had beautiful tapestries. The chairs and tables were made of gold, which I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't like that, but
it's Donald Trump chic, but okay.
You can sell those things and
I
then
get
buy whatever you want with it. Like decorate how you want.
Buy better chairs. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceilings. All of the rooms and chambers had been carpeted. Hopefully not the piss pots. Just kidding. Carpeted bathrooms. It's nasty.
Not a fan. Yeah, not a fan of a carpeted bathroom. That's to be sure.
But I guess back in the day, they didn't have indoor plumbing anyway.
True.
We know what they had. So furthermore, the tables sagged under the weight of food and bottles of the very best wine. Ooh. And then behind the palace was a huge yard that had stables full of horses and cows and fine carriages and beautiful gardens with flowers and fine fruit trees, which again, man, what I wouldn't give for some mature fruit trees. Particularly, guys, lemon. I love a big old lemon tree. I cry every day. I don't have a big lemon tree.
You cry that life hasn't given you lemons.
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, what I wouldn't do for some mature fruit trees. They're very valuable too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it's the fact that like you can't just like be rich tomorrow and have mature fruit trees in your yard. Like that's the thing to me. That's like, it just takes time. Like it's not something that can be rushed unless you have a magical flounder. So also within or just past those gardens was a pleasure park, which if people are not familiar with what a pleasure park is, it is an area where stags and deer and hare, pheasants, like hunting game would kind of be allowed to remain wild, and then it would also get sometimes like artificially stocked with animals so that anytime somebody wanted to go out and hunt, they had the pleasure of going out and hunting in their own gardens.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
What a life. What a life they were living.
Yeah. So much better.
Yeah. I have a feeling that I've caught on to the pattern in this story. I don't think they're gonna appreciate it.
You have excellent pattern recognition. So the wife, of course, she was like, oh, isn't this so much like better than what we had before? Like, aren't you so glad you listened to me and you went and you talked to that flounder? And the husband was like, yeah, I guess, but hopefully it'll stay that way. Like, let's just live in this beautiful castle and be content. And then she said, we'll have to think about that and sleep on it. We'll have to decide whether we're content or not tomorrow. So they went to bed, and the next morning, the wife woke up, and it says, just daybreak, and from her window she could see the glorious countryside lying before her. And as her husband started to wake up and started like stretching, moving around, she started poking him and was like, okay, husband, get up and look out the window. Listen, don't you think you should be king over all this country? You should go to the flounder and tell him that you want to be the king. What's funny is it said that we want to be king, which I'm like, that's interesting language. Like, go tell the flounder that we want to be king, not you should be the king and I'll be the queen. We want to be the king. And he's like, wife, why would we want to be king? I don't want to be king. And she's like, well, if you don't want to be king, I do. Go to the flounder and tell him that I want to be king. And her husband was like, why would you want to be king? I don't want to go tell the flounder that you want to be the king. And she's like, why not? It would be easy enough for him to do. All of this has been easy enough for him to do. Just go and tell him that I want to be the king. So the husband, he was like, oh my gosh, like what? No, having to do this again. So he was getting really distressed that his wife wanted to be king, and he like, it's not right. It's just not right, he thought. She's rising above her station. But he did not want to go. But same as before, he went down to the seashore and to call out to the flounder. So when he got there, the sea, it was gray and black, and the water was twisting and turning like foreshadowing. And it said it smelled putrid, the water. And the fisherman stood by the water and he said, flounder, flounder in the sea, if you're a man, then speak to me. Though I do not care for my wife's request, I've come to ask it nonetheless. And instantly the flounder was there and he's like, what does she want? And the man said, oh, she wants to be king. And the flounder was like, all right, go back. She's already king. So when the man started to head back to the house, back to his, where the stone house used to be, where the cottage used to be, where the piss pot used to be, he instead saw this massive palace. Huge towers, glistening ornaments all over it, sentries standing by the front gates, and soldiers and with uniforms and drums and trumpets. And he entered the palace and he found that everything was made out of pure marble and gold. There were velvet covers with golden tassels, and the door to the hall were open. He could see the whole court, and his wife was sitting on this big throne of gold and diamonds, and on her head she had a huge crown, and her hand had a scepter of pure gold and jewels. And there were 2 rows of ladies in waiting who were standing on either side of her, and it's each lady a head shorter than the next, which I'm like, wait, what? How little do these ladies be getting? I understand.
Matryoshka dolls.
Oh, they're Matryoshka dolls. I understand that they mean that, like, they're standing in height order or whatever. It was just funny to think, like, each lady a head shorter than the next. Just imagining that you get, like, 5 ladies down and, like, they've got, like, a person who's, like, 2'3".
Uh-huh.
Anyway. So the fisherman stepped forward and he's like, wife, now that you're king, are you happy? Are you going to be wanting like anything more? And she's like, it is true. I am the king. But, husband, now that I am king, I find I have too much time on my hands and I can't stand it anymore. Go back to the flounder and tell him she's been king for like 5 seconds, literally like 5 seconds. And tell him I'm king, but now I must become emperor as well. Which I'm like, you think you're a king and you have too much time on your hands, but you think being an emperor will... I don't know. So he's like, why do you want to become an emperor? And she's like, husband, go to the flounder. I want to be emperor. And she's like, he can't make you emperor. I don't want to tell that to the flounder. There can only be one emperor in the empire. The flounder can't make you the emperor. He definitely can't do that. And his wife was like, what? I'm king and you're just a husband. Yeah, girl, get it. I want you to go there at once. And I mean at once. If he can make me a king, he can also make me an emperor. Go there at once. So the husband had to return. He had been commanded by a king. So he walked back scared, thinking like, I don't think this is going to turn out well. Oh, this is going to be so bad. This is such arrogance to want to be emperor. The flounder's going to get sick and tired of this. And when he got to the sea, it was black and dense, and it had begun from like the twisting and the turning before, bubbles started to rise up and a strong wind whipped across the surface of the water, making it curdle. If you're making water curdle, that ain't right. You're going to need to put some chemicals in that to fix that. You're going to need to take a cup of that down to your nearest pool supply store and have them test that water to tell you how you're going to fix that. Your water shouldn't be curdling, is what I'm telling you. That's my expert opinion.
Yeah, I think you're spot on.
Yeah. This is a pool waters podcast. This is an algae in the reflecting pools podcast. Anyway, so the man was already frightened looking at the way that the water was, which, yeah, same. That's disgusting. Water shouldn't curdle. So he stepped forward and he said, "Flounder, flounder in the sea. If you're a man, then speak to me. Though I do not care for my wife's request, I've come to make it nonetheless." And instantly the flounder was there and was, "What does she want?" He's like, "Oh, flounder, my wife wants to be the emperor." And he's like, "Okay, go back home. She's already emperor." So when the man went home, when he arrived, the entire castle was made of polished marble, blah blah blah. We get the picture. More like alabaster, gold, soldiers, trumpets, cymbals, drums like plague, dukes and counts, people who are, coming to pay homage to the new emperor. They opened up these doors, obviously made of pure gold. What else? And it said his wife was sitting on a 2-mile high throne made from a single piece of cast gold, which I'm like, dang, that fish got magic for days.
It's like every time he goes above and beyond, and still not enough.
Not enough. She was wearing a golden crown 3 yards tall.
Oh my gosh.
That would be heavy.
Does a yard mean the same thing?
Yeah, heavy. Heavy
now?
hangs the head. Where's the crown? Jeez.
A 9-foot tall crown?
Yeah, made out of gold. Girl, you're going to snap your neck. You're going to fall 2 miles down off of that throne. That's what's going to get her in the end. Anyway, covered with diamonds and garnets, and in one hand she was holding the scepter and in the other the imperial globe. And so she was flanked by all these like bodyguards that said each man shorter than the next, beginning with a tremendous giant 2 miles tall. Dang, girl. And ending with the tiniest man who is no bigger than my pinky. Where'd you find him? Is he a fetus? So there were also princes and dukes standing around, and the husband went over to his wife, I guess called up to her. He was like, "Wife, now you're the emperor, aren't you?" And she's like, "Yes, I'm the emperor." He was like, "Oh, it's wonderful that you're emperor. Let's keep it that way." And she's like, "Husband, why are you standing there? It's true that I am emperor, but now I want to be pope. Go and tell this to the flounder." I'm like, "Why, girl, why would you want to be pope?" And the husband, same sentiment as me. What in heaven's name? Why would you want to be the pope? You can't be the pope. There's only one pope in all of Christendom. The flounder can't make you a pope. And she's like, "Husband, I want to be pope. Go there and tell him at once." And he's like, "No, wife, I don't want to tell him that. It won't go well. That's too much to ask. The flounder cannot possibly make you into a pope." And she's like, "Stop talking nonsense, husband. If he can make me an emperor, he can make me the pope. Do what I say. I'm the emperor, and you're just a husband. Do as I say." So, frightened, feeling rather queasy, he goes back to the fish, and again, it's like water, nasty. Strong wind swept across the land. Dark clouds flew by as evening came. Leaves falling from the tree. Sea rose up in waves and roared as if it were boiling. So obviously we can tell that things are not going well. And it said in the distance, the fishermen could hear ships firing their guns in distress as they were tossed up and down in the waves, which I'm like, this is affecting more people than just you. Madam, people are getting hurt. But he stepped forward. "Flounder, flounder in the sea. If you're a man, then speak to me. Though I do not care for my wife's request, I've come to ask it nonetheless." And instantly the flounder was there. "What does she want?" And the man was like, "She wants to be the pope." And the flounder was like, "Okay, she's already pope." So the man went home, and when he arrived, he found this great church, but nothing but palaces surrounding it. So I'm like, he's trying to like force his way past all these people. And I said everything inside of the church This like massive cathedral, whatever, it was illuminated by thousands and thousands of candles. And his wife was sitting on a throne even higher than the one before, dressed in pure gold, with 3 big golden crowns on her head. And there were bishops and priests standing around her, rows of candles. The biggest candle was as thick and as large as the tallest tower, and the tiniest was a church candle. And all the emperors and kings from all around were turning and kneeling before her and kissing her slipper. Trying to imagine the stairs leading up to like a throne that's like that high. But anyway, the husband goes up to her and he was like, "Wife, now you're the Pope, aren't you?" And she's like, "Yes, clearly I am the Pope," as all women should be. And so he, stepped forward and he was taking a good look at his wife, and it said it was as if he were looking into the bright sun. And after gazing at her for a while, he said, "Oh, wife, it's wonderful that you're Pope. Let's keep it that way." And she sat stiff as a board. And then he said, "Wife, please be satisfied. Now that you're Pope, you can't become anything greater." And she said, "I'll think about it." And they both went to bed, but she was not satisfied. In bed? No, just kidding. Well, yes, but no. They both went to bed, but she was not satisfied. Her ambitions would not let her sleep. Girl, I've been there. So she kept thinking of ways that she might be greater than she currently was. Like, what could be greater than the Pope? What could I do that would make me greater than the Pope? Her husband was sleeping soundly, for he had done a lot of running around that day, which is true because that all was like one day. She went from cottage by the sea to being like, "Nope, I would like to be Pope by the end of the day."
In one day.
Like,
oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that was one day.
Yeah. That it was like every time he would get back, he's like, "You good?" And she's like, "You know what? No. Walk back." She didn't even like give it that same 2 weeks that she gave the cottage. She would like instantly think of, and she could have saved him a lot of walking around if she had, thought of Pope first.
Yeah.
So, anyway, she could not sleep, and so she tossed and turned from side to side the whole night, trying to think of ways that she might become greater than she currently was. But nothing was occurring to her. So, when the sun began to rise and she saw the red glow of the dawn, she sat up in bed and she watched the sun rise from her window, and a thought occurred to her. I could also make the sun and the moon rise. And she poked her husband in the ribs and she said, "Husband, wake up and go to the flounder. Tell him I want to be God."
I knew that's what she was going to say next, but I also was like, no, she wouldn't.
She wouldn't.
Would she?
That's crazy. I mean, I was shocked when she was like, "I want to be the Pope." I was like, "Ma'am, have you even gone to a theological college?" Just kidding. So the husband, he's, half asleep, not knowing whether he's dreaming. He was in so much shock by what she had said. And he just like flopped, fell out of bed. And after, being banged awake from hitting himself on the floor, he rubbed his eyes and he was like, "What did you just say?" She's like, "Husband, if I can't make the sun and the moon rise, I won't be able to bear it."
Okay.
Do you think I want to just sit around and watch these things happen? No, I want to make them happen. I won't have any more peace until I myself can make the sun and the moon rise. So then she gave her husband, it said, such an awful look that a shudder ran through his bones. She should teach classes. She's girl bossing too close to the sun. Anyway, so she was like, "Go at once. I want to be like God." And he's like, "No, wife, please. The flounder can't do that. He can make you an emperor and a pope, but I beg you, just be content, be happy, stay the pope." And she immediately, furious, it says her hair flew wildly about her head, and she tore open her bodice and gave him a kick with her foot and screamed, "I won't stand for it. I can't stand it any longer. I want you to go at once." So he slipped on his trousers and he ran off like a madman. And he went outside, and there was a great storm that was raging, and he could barely keep his feet underneath him because houses and trees were falling, mountains were tumbling, boulders were crashing into the sea from the cliffs. The sky was completely pitch black, and there was thunder and lightning. Black waves rose up in the sea as high as church steeples and mountains, and they all had crests of white foam on top. And the fisherman screamed, but he could not even hear his own words. Flounder, flounder in the sea, if you're a man, then speak to me. Though I do not care for my wife's request, I'll come to ask it nonetheless. And Flounder appeared and said, what does she want? And he said, she wants to be God. And the flounder said, go back home. She's sitting in your piss pot again. And there they have still lived to this very day.
Whoa.
So, I do want to point out, this is like the opposite of a rise tale. This is not a rags to riches story. It's like the power of this story is like the reversal of that expectation of it being like, nope, you actually did not get charmed. Like, you did not get that. And that's like the psychological speaking of it, of like, of the charm. The thing that it like sticks with people so much like about the story is that like it does not end. One, the way that kind of you're used to stories like typically ending. But also, I think everybody hearing that story can see why it lends itself to people thinking that like, oh, there's clearly a moral in that story.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it seems like, well, it's interesting because it seems like it's not too much to ask to be king, emperor, pope. But it's like when you ask to become God, then that's too much. You go back to where you were before, or whatever. Like it seems like that would be the moral.
Do you know what's crazy, Geoff? Is that you have just said what is not the moral of the story, but what is the like the tipping point like of the story of that, because a lot of people will think that the moral of the story is that you should be content with what you have. But when you go back and you look at the beginning of the story, what they had was like they were living in destitution.
Yeah.
They did not have anything. He came home that day with not even a fish. So when people think that the moral is like, oh, you should be content with what you have,
because they were rewarded repeatedly for not being content with what they had.
Like it's, and like there's nothing wrong with striving for a little bit more or wanting to not be living below what a human being needs, like to survive, where it's like their house was barely a house. Like, so it's like, do you have shelter? Technically, in terms of the way that a cave is shelter, they didn't have like food, probably like, you know, barely had clothing. Or so wanting more, especially like the bare necessities for life to continue, fighting really hard not to sing the song. There's not a harm in that. But where like the tipping point of like the story like really is for this one is wanting to like basically surpass the bounds of nature, for like wanting to be God, to be like a rule over all. And so in this story that we know that the Brothers Grimm were catering to or like dealing with a very Christian audience, that tipping point was like wanting to be God. In other tales, it is different. So before we get too incredibly far ahead of ourselves, Geoff is going to be retelling a different variant of the ATU Type 555 that is from Japan, and it is called The Stonecutter. The version that he has, because it's translated into English, it is found in the Crimson Fairy book edited very slightly by Andrew Lang, mostly edited by his wife, Lenora Lang.
Thanks, Lenora. Once upon a time, there lived a stonecutter who went every day to a great rock in the side of a big mountain and cut out slabs for gravestones or houses, which I thought was like a crazy detail. Gravestones got to come from somewhere.
Gravestones do have to come from somewhere. And that's what, like, anytime somebody like encounters, they're like, somebody's like, oh yeah, I'm a grave digger. They're like, oh, that's horrifying. It's well, somebody's got to dig the grave. They don't make the bodies to go in there.
Yeah, they don't murder people to fill the cemetery. They're just making room for them in the cemetery.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm thinking of like like the significance too of like the stones on Japanese graves, and like they're important.
Yeah.
So good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just interesting that that's like I mean, I guess it's like, what other things do you use stones for? But it's the fact that it's like those are the two that are specifically mentioned. I think gravestones are mentioned first. I was just surprised by.
Yeah.
But because he was a stonecutter, a very experienced stonecutter, he understood the types of stones that he would want, the types of stones that were best for which purposes, the ones that were good for, using in houses and building, ones that were good for the gravestones. And because he was a careful workman, and as good as his job, he had plenty of customers. And so,
Nice.
for a long time, he was pretty happy. He was doing pretty well. He was pretty content with his life. And he was like, can't ask for anything better than this.
Mm-hmm.
But also, in this mountain, there dwelt a spirit. I just like the word dwelt.
Indeed. Dwelt is a fun word.
I don't say it enough in my regular life. But when I'm reading fairy tales, by golly, I'm going to say it when I have the chance. But yeah, so the spirit lived in the mountains, dwelt in the mountains, and would often appear to people and would help them in various ways, but especially helping them to become very rich and prosperous. The stonecutter, however, he had never come across this spirit. So he was, content, but not rich and prosperous. And so when anyone would tell him about this spirit, he just would like shake his head and be like, yeah, that's a tall tale I'm hearing right there. Did not believe it at all. But there was a time coming that would soon change his opinion on the matter. Because one day, the stonecutter was carrying a gravestone to the house of a very, very, very rich man. And while he was there at the rich man's house, he saw all sorts of like beautiful things that he had never even dreamed were possible. And so he started in his daily work thinking about all these wonderful, beautiful things that this rich man had and wishing that he could have more, desiring more for his life than he could have on a meager stonecutter's salary. And so his daily work got harder and harder. The stones felt heavier, and he just, every night would go to bed like, oh, I wish I was a rich man. I could sleep in a bed with silk curtains and gold tassels. I'd be so happy if I could sleep in a bed like that. And while he was saying that aloud one night, a voice answered him from the darkness and said, your wish is heard. A rich man you shall be. And at the sound of the voice, the stonecutter looked around and he could not see anybody there. And so he thought, this was all in his head. He'd been listening to these people telling these stories too long, too much, and he was going crazy. I guess he was saying that while he was while he's working up in the mountain where these spirits that can make you rich and prosperous were known to live, he was saying this. And so at the end of the day, he picked up his tools and started going home. And he's like, you know what? I don't really feel like doing any more work today. Sounds like he turned in early. But when he reached the house that he lived in, he was amazed because instead of the little wooden hut that he had lived in its place was a huge palace. It was filled with all this amazing furniture. And of course, the most splendid and amazing thing was the bed. And it was just like the bed that he'd been dreaming of while he was working and toiling away, cutting stones in the mountain. And so he was so happy. He was says, beside himself with joy.
Man, I can relate. A good bed.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot better than that.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately too. They talk about, you should spend your money where you spend your time, and you spend, a third of your life, a third of every single day, asleep in your bed. And so, really it's worth it
for me
to make sure that it's a good quality bed
for the work I do.
Oh my gosh. I was thinking this in the context of this is what happens. I usually tend to get the best phone that I can for a couple of reasons. One, for good or for ill, I always have my phone with me and use it for a ton of stuff and spend a lot of time on my phone. So, spending my money where I spend my time. But also I keep my phones for a really, really long time. I'll buy the newest, best one that I can get because I know that I'm going to have it for 3, 4 or more years.
Yeah.
And so it needs to be able to keep up for that time. So I was thinking about that, and then now thinking about, the bed. I don't know, whatever. I really need to buy a new bed. That's part of the thing. But I'm like, you know what? I want a new phone instead. Just kidding. Actually, I have a really new phone. But my wife does need a new phone. But also, we need a new bed. Our bed is really old. And I'm like, but I don't want, it's so expensive. I don't want to spend all this money on a new bed.
I know.
If only the spirit would hear me. I would really like a new bed. Spirit. And maybe I could be like the stonecutter in the story.
And you promise to be content with what you.
Yes, I will. As soon as I have this new bed and a new phone and the other things that I know that I will want once I have those things that I don't know that I want yet, then I'll be content.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the stonecutter in his fancy schmancy new bed, amazing palace, fancy furniture. He forgets all about his old life and is enjoying his new life. But then one day in the middle of summer, he's like realizing how hot it is. He's like, the sun is just like blazing furiously in the sky, and it's getting so hot. And he's like, it's getting so hot that I can hardly breathe. And so he was like, I'm just going to stay indoors until it's evening time because it's way too hot to go out there. And it says, he was rather dull, for he had never learned how to amuse himself and was peeping through the closed blinds to see what was going on in the street. So it's like, because he'd spent, this is what I think, because he'd spent his life working, you know, like that's what he knew how to do. But then he gave that up. So he's like, he didn't know how to like spend his time when, if it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And so what did he decide to do? He decided to just like, you know, be a little, not a peeping Tom, because what's it like, you know,
what's
the
a
stereotype of
reverse
those, like-
peeping Tom?
Yeah, what is a reverse
Peeping Tom,
Google?
a person who looks
Hey
out
Siri,
their own
what's
window.
what's a reverse peeping Tom? But you know, I just like imagine those like you know, the stereotype of like the old ladies like constantly like nosy neighbors, you know, like looking around.
Nosy neighbor. Yeah, I guess he was being a nosy neighbor, or because I'm like, that's what my dog's favorite thing to do as well, is so that if
Yeah.
anybody is like walking down the street, they can bark at them.
So he's looking out the street, finding people that he can maybe bark at, who knows. And he sees a carriage being drawn by. And he sees there's like all these servants going along with the carriage, and they're wearing, you know, like blue and silver and looking very nice. And inside of the carriage, there was a prince. And above that prince's head was a golden umbrella that was there to protect him from the sun.
Yeah.
And the stonecutter's like, ah, that's genius.
That is genius.
Like, if only I were a prince, I could have a beautiful carriage and not have to walk around in the heat. And I would also have an amazing golden umbrella over my head to protect me from the sun. He's like, I would be so happy. If only I could be a prince with a carriage and a golden umbrella over my head. I would be so happy. And so, as he's saying that, the voice of the mountain heard him and said again, your wish is heard. A prince you shall be. And a prince he was. Just like the prince that he had seen in front of his carriage. There was like a whole company of men behind his carriage. There was a bunch of servants dressed in scarlet and gold in comparison to the silver and blue of the previous prince. Seems like he leveled up. And of course, above him, over his head, was the coveted golden umbrella. And every desire that he had was granted. But if you've picked up on the pattern, you might have realized and suspected that that was not enough. And he was looking around and he was like, you know what? It says he looked around for something to wish for. Like, he didn't even have something that like came around. He's like, what else? I'm not happy. What else can I want and desire? And so what he noticed as he's looking around is that despite the fact that he's having water poured on his grass to keep it nice and green, it's not staying nice and green because the rays of the sun are scorching it. And even, you know, in spite of the umbrella that he's like holding over his head and as he's being carted around town, like he's still getting like darker and darker tan from being out in the sun. And he's like, you know what? The sun is stronger than I am. If only I were the sun. He like did a huge skip from prince to, you know, he didn't have to be prince, king, emperor, pope, you know, like straight to sun, straight to celestial body, you know.
Yeah.
The mountain, hearing him wishing to be the sun, said, your wish is granted. The sun you shall be. And boom, there it is. He's the sun. And he felt so proud and amazing in his power. He was, you know, shooting his beams above and below the earth into the heavens all over. He's burning up the grass in the fields. He's scorching the faces of princes and poor people. But after a while, you know, he got a little tired of blasting his rays all over the place and scorching people's grass and their faces. And he's like, yeah, man, there's like nothing really for me to do now. Like, I've already scorched all the grass and burned everyone's face. What can I do to fill this hole in my soul? And as he's thinking that, a cloud passes in front of his face between him and the ground below. And he's like, not able to scorch his rays where the cloud is. And he's like, what the heck? This cloud is able to capture my rays. It obviously must be like stronger than I am. So I wish that I was a cloud so I could be mightier than even the sun. And so the spirit of the mountain said, your wish is heard. A cloud you shall be. And a cloud he was.
That's really interesting to me just because of I'm trying to remember if it's one of the Aesop fable stories or what, that's like the contest between like the north wind and the sun, where they're like trying to see who's like more powerful. And the wind, they're like, oh, I bet I can take that jacket off that man. And the wind was like blowing and blowing, and the person just held their jacket on like tighter and tighter. And then the sun shone its rays, and the guy like took off his jacket, and
Yeah.
proved that like the sun was more powerful than the like wind. And so it's just interesting to me that they're like cloud more powerful than the sun. I'm like, all right, I guess we
Seems
have
like a
different.
downgrade to me, honestly.
Yeah, but that's fine. No judgment.
I see his logic. I think it's flawed and faulty, but it's kind of one of those like I feel like it's like a little well, it goes even into this even more, but like it's kind of like a rock paper scissors situation where it's like
Yeah.
this beats that, but this beats that, but this beats that,
Yeah.
and it like
he's gonna be
becomes,
going
like,
in a
circular
circle.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, he wished to be a cloud, and he was made a cloud, and he was flying around between the sun and the earth, and he's like catching the sun's beams and holding them, preventing them from scorching all the stuff below. And so below him, where he's blocking the sun's rays and letting down rain, the earth was green. There were flowers growing and blossoming, and he's like, you know what? This isn't enough. This isn't fun. I'm bored of this now. You know what I want to do? I want to rain and rain and rain and rain and rain until the rivers overflow their banks, and I'm soaking all the crops, and I'm flooding towns and villages and just like killing a whole bunch of people. That's what I want to do. And so that is exactly what he did. He just started raining around everywhere, flooding everywhere, causing all sorts of damage. And he's doing that. He realized that even though, he's destroying crops, he's like eroding riverbanks as the banks overflow with water. Entire towns and villages are being washed away. But he sees that there's a great rock on the side of a mountain that just would not budge, no matter how much he rained on it. And as a cloud, he's like, what? What is this? I thought it was the most powerful thing here that I can block even the rays of the sun. But this rock is too powerful, cannot be moved by my great floods. And so he says, you know what? I wish that I was a rock. And so the spirit of the mountains heard his wish and said, your wish is heard. A rock you shall be. And
Man,
so
if you thought you were bored before.
Yeah. Imagine how bored you're going to be as a rock. But at least at first, he felt pretty great. He felt very strong. He was excited. And, the heat of the sun didn't bother him as a rock, didn't burn him or do anything. The rain couldn't move him. He's like, man, this really is the best thing to be a rock. I feel so great. This is what I've always wanted. But then one day he's sitting there and he hears a strange noise kind of at his feet, which I thought the rock's feet. Where are his feet? And he looks down and he sees that there is this little man that's putting stone cutting tools into the area around his feet and cutting pieces of him off.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? Hold up. How is this child of earth greater than a rock?
Yeah.
If only I could be a man. If only I could be a stonecutter. And the spirit of the mountain answered, your wish is heard. A man once more you shall be. And so there, a man he was, and found himself again, as in the beginning of the story, working by the sweat of his brow to cut stones for gravestones and houses, and went back to living in, sleeping on a hard bed with scant food. But he learned to be satisfied with it because he realized that he was mightier than the rock, which was mightier than the sun, which was mightier than the cloud. And no longer did he long to be someone or something else. And he didn't ask for anything else except for what he was. And he was happy. And he heard the voice of the spirit of the mountain no longer. The end.
Again, it's a story that I feel like it lends itself to, there's like a clear moral.
Yeah. Even more than the other one, I feel like it does. Because it's like, it's his desire. Like he gets to the point where he wants to be who he was.
Yeah.
Like in the Farmer and His Wife, Fisherman and His Wife, she wants to be something greater and greater and greater until it's like she, wanted something way too great and then was like just sent back to where she was to start with.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, it's like he went back there because that's what he wanted. He like followed the logic around back to being, who he was and realizing that he really was mightier than the rock all along and how his life was great. Which, I mean, I think this a lot more lends itself to having a moral or, being interpreted as having a moral.
Yeah. Especially like in terms of the way that we think about where this story came from, that like it is Japanese. And so that kind of like spiritual line of thinking of reaching a contentment with like where you are in your life, and this person going on this journey of like becoming other like items in the universe and like realizing his own place back in it. It feels to me, I like this story better.
Yeah, I like the story a lot.
because it is this like idea of like I can hear that story and think about like, oh, what are the things that I would possibly like wish for better for myself, or want to change about myself because I perceive like an advantage in that I don't have. And so reading that story is really nice because like I can be like, oh, you know what? No, I should be content with what I have in my life.
Mhm.
But then again, it's like when you are looking at the things that he's then like going back to be content with, it's like, is that necessarily the lesson that everybody would want to put into the story? Or is our morals always very like culturally and time
Mhm.
specific?
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts. So let's see if I can get them out in any kind
Yes.
of order. One thing that I was expecting in The Fisherman and His Wife, because I had read this story and had not heard The Fisherman and His Wife,
Yeah.
was I was expecting something similar where, like the things that she was asking for was like greater responsibility, like to be king, then to be emperor, then to be pope. Those are like positions of leadership that I feel like, from the outside, we're like, oh, I mean, I'm actually not this way at all, but like, it would be great to be in this like position of power and have all this like responsibility in doing these things, and it's like, yeah, you have a lot of power, but with great power comes great responsibility. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that you have to do. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you're so busy, you're like having to, be taking care of stuff, and people are coming in and asking things all the time. And I was expecting her to like, as she's getting more and more responsibilities, go and be like, you know what? Actually, I realize I don't want to be in charge of so much stuff. It's a lot of
Yeah.
work. I don't actually like this. I would rather just be in charge of like my own, like, I kind of thought that she would go back to the not like living in a piss pot, but like go back to like that first cottage that the fish had like granted
Yeah.
them, and realize like, oh, that's actually great. Like I came to this, all my like material needs were provided, like I had food, I had all these dishes, I had a furnished house, I had a great house to live in. And like, that's kind of where I would want to be.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened in that story.
Yeah.
And it was funny when you had sent me the story to retell, like literally probably like 20 or 30 minutes earlier, I was thinking about like, I don't know if it's actually a real quote, but like a kind of a quote or a line of thinking attributed to like Buddha and like Buddhism about like desire is like the root of suffering. And if we can like give up our desire, then we can, avoid suffering.
Yes.
Which I've heard stuff too about how it's like that's kind of misinterpreted too. And especially like saying like the Buddha said like, oh, life is suffering is kind of misconstrued, because it's like life, there will be suffering in life.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
that like life is suffering, but it's like no matter what you can do, you cannot escape life.
Yeah. Because I'm like, yeah, because like life is not all one thing. Because
Yeah.
it is suffering, and it is also like joyfulness. It's connectivity. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was thinking about that idea of like, and being like, yeah, it is like kind of true. Like that some of like the greatest suffering that I experience as like low level suffering as it actually is like because of desires and like unmet desires or like expectations like not being met. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
if I could just not want things or not expect things and not desire things, then like I wouldn't be sad when I don't get them, because I wouldn't want them in the first place. It's like I
Yeah.
saw like the truth in that. And then you sent me this thing. I was like, it's exactly what I was thinking about. Yes, I need to abandon desire so that I can live a life of bliss,
You read the story and were like, I fully believe like in this like moral, let it like wash over me. Which therein is kind of like that struggle of like, if you give up all wants and desires, if you suddenly don't have a desire for more or to do or to become, then you are stagnant. You are stuck the way that you are and you always have been. I'm not saying that people should always be like striving for like more and more material objects.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that the uncomfortability of like wanting something else actually gives you like an action item to do. Like
Yeah.
it helps you move through life and like create something with your life instead of just being a person that is living. You are like creating things with your life. Like you become a creator of your life instead of just like a person in a life.
Yeah.
And there's the purpose in that. Like, and you don't want to necessarily be a person who is sitting in a hovel hoping every day that you catch a fish.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to be like, oh, I might need to invest in better equipment, or I need to like find a way to Learn a different trade so that I can make my life easier and better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's like a level of going back to the, life is suffering or whatever of it all as well. You can't actually abandon desire completely because like your physical body has needs that it
Yeah.
will make very loudly known to you if you do not satisfy them, like food and water.
And sleep and yeah.
Yeah, and like, those other things. So it's like just like it's impossible to get through life without experiencing suffering, just because that's like the nature of life. You can't actually give up all desire, but it's kind of, finding the balance
Yeah.
of, like you're saying. I mean, I like what you said because I hadn't thought of it that way as far as like it being something that like propels you to, improve and strive for things rather than just like staying stagnant. So like, yeah, I mean, you need to get yourself into a place where like it's a balance of kind of like desiring and wanting things that are attainable,
Mm-hmm.
like that you can actually, like you said, like improve, and there's like going to be a limit to that. I don't know. It's like, but it's really hard to find that balance because it's like, is it just meeting your base material needs? I don't know. But that's like
Yeah.
the work. That's the work of our lives. It's like trying to find
Yeah.
that balance.
Absolutely.
Like in the second story of the stonecutter, I really liked, I mean, I kind of already said this, but like the circular nature of it, because it talked about in the very beginning was like he was happy and content until he saw like this rich man's house. Like he was in the state that we should be in. You know what I mean? In my mind. And also, I guess as a larger point too, it's like even though what we're saying is like these stories seem like they may have morals, but they don't. But it also, I think, is okay to and like to look at the stories and then get the meaning that you want from it. I think the mistake is in saying like this is what the story is trying to say. It's like it's lots of times not trying to say anything. But I think in any story, even a story about the bird murdering everybody, there's something that you could take from that if you want to, some meaning that you can find in it if you want to. And it's going to be like personal to you and your situation and your way of interpreting it. And so that's what I was choosing to do with this, was seeing like, he was happy in the beginning, the stonecutter. It says like very specifically, then he saw something that he wanted, got to that life and realized like, oh, like he didn't have anything to do, and it just led to wanting more and more and more. And it kind of came from this place of like, when he was the stonecutter and back at the beginning, like he had a meaningful way to pass his time in his life. Like he had a meaningful work to do, which was like providing gravestones, which like we said is something important, providing stones that were used by people to make their homes. Like he had something meaningful to do. So he wasn't like sitting there destitute and doing nothing.
Yeah.
But he had a need and requirement to work in order to like feed himself enough that propelled him to do this work that was then also meaningful for other people. And he started getting in trouble when he didn't have things to do, And so I thought that was interesting. And that's kind of like, I'm like looping it back to what you were saying about how it propels us to be better, inspires us, motivates us to do something that is, is meaningful for ourselves and also hopefully, for other people.
Yeah. And I love what you just said too about what we choose to get out of stories. We are absolutely free to get something out of a story or to have a story teach us something through its telling. Absolutely, you can read like a fairy tale and get something out of it meaningful in your life. There are so many stories that I can't believe, like come up in conversations so often that are like meaningful to me, that like keep reoccurring in my life where I keep thinking of them because of the lessons that I've got while reading them, or even the lessons I got while talking about them with you, Geoff. And people like, that's great. You absolutely should. I mean, anytime you're even reading a novel, even if you are reading smut and you find something beautiful and meaningful in that smut that teaches you something about like the human condition, get that like golden nugget inside of like a story and like keep it and let it like teach you something. But for the scope of like what we're talking about in fairy tales, it is to understand that fairy tales don't have to have a moral. And even the ones that we've looked at where we've gotten a moral out of it, we can still see how our moral that we've gotten out of it doesn't totally fit in with what happened in the story, in terms of like, when we're saying like, oh, don't be too greedy and then saying, well, what's too greedy? Or
Mhm.
don't look at somebody else's life and wish that you had their life because you think it would solve some of your problems, because there's always going to be other issues and problems like that, those like other people, or in some cases natural phenomenon, celestial bodies also have and face.
An interesting thing about that too. Well, never mind.
No, do it.
I'll just say this, and like maybe it doesn't fit anywhere, which is fine. But like in the case of the stonecutter too, I feel like it isn't really like I can see how it's not making a point. Like I can see how I got what I got out of it, but I can also see how it's not really saying anything like specifically, because it's just telling the story of this stonecutter, which might not be the story of every person. You know, like every person might not be happy and content being a stonecutter.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I don't know what I was going to say about that, except for it's just like, it's just telling this one story.
Yeah. I mean, so what's interesting about that? So I'll take a quote from like this essay that's about the Japanese story of the stonecutter. It says, the students usually comment that in the Japanese tale, the ending is not really an unhappy ending because the stonecutter is fully satisfied with being returned to his original stonecutting self. However, this ending is achieved without the elevation in status requisite for what are called lack tales, which is the opposite of like a rise tale. Rather, the hero recognizes his original status as in fact lacking nothing. But what you're also saying as well is like, that's his story, that he might have got to the end of like that and he's realized that, and that's good. That's him. Somebody else might get to the end of that loop and then in 3 months later going to work at a different person's house and being like, oh wow, he has a really nice thing. I wish I and still have like not truly like learned anything. Or perhaps somebody else, would have gotten to that house level and been like, I'm happy here, or whatever. Like, it's just one person. Like, really, this story, without it being paired with somebody else being like, let's look for a moral in that. Or like a priest standing up and like retelling that story so that they can, be like, oh, now the lesson we learned from that is, without that paired commentary, it is just a story that's fun because it goes in like a full loop.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, this guy did this, then this, then this, then this, then this, and he ended up right back at the beginning. Ha ha ha.
And there's no saying that like he wouldn't then, like start the
do
loop
the
over
whole
again or
loop
like
over
that.
again.
Except I kind of think that he wouldn't. I think one of the things that's sort of interesting about it as well is like he ended up back where he started, but he's not the same person as he was before. He's gone through that whole cycle and realizing like, I've gotten these other things, I've gone through these other things that I thought I wanted.
Yeah.
And then I eventually ended up wanting to be who I am now. And like now I've experienced all that and known what else exists out there that I could have and what I could do, and realized that it's not actually satisfying in the way that I think it would be satisfying. So now he can sit in the person that he was. And I think that he is changed in the way that he goes and sees that person's house and he knows that does look nice. It is really great. I recognize the great things about it, but I also now know that that's not for me. So I don't feel that like longing and desire and like temptation to try to live that person's life, because I've done it and I know that it's not actually what I want, even though it seems like I do, which I do kind of like that aspect of it. Was like, you sometimes have to go on the journey around, even if it ends up back where you started, to realize that that's where you needed to be. And I've had things like that in my life of like, where I needed to experience different things to realize like that,
that
like,
that's not what I want. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So where I've had, like just had to have experiences that helped me realize what I wanted my life to be, or whatever, like in small ways.
You didn't become the sun?
No, I did not become the sun yet. There's still time.
Yep.
So anyway, I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's just fun that it goes around. And it's like, and it could only work with a stonecutter, because like if he was like, I mean, you could probably try to make it work with something else, but like, it's like, oh, he could be a fisherman, because a fisherman still would fish water out of all these flooded waters and like make a life for himself or something. I don't know, but like, it's like it could go around and around and around and around again. But then me having to get meaning out of it, realize like, no, he wouldn't go around anymore because he's changed. Or he may be cutting stone again, but it's never the same stone, and he is not the same man, or whatever that thing is I'm trying to force into about the man beautiful. Walking in the river and not being the same man and not being the same river.
Nice. I was thinking the metamorphosis was the weird changes we made along the way. But then I was like, that doesn't make sense. Because yeah, that's what metamorphosis is.
Yeah, it does
Changing.
make sense. It's just
But-
literally true.
Yeah.
The metamorphosis with the changes we made all the way.
And it's
Definitionally.
definitionally. Oh man. But yeah, I love that as human beings we do want to search for meaning in the stories that we read, and you absolutely can. There's no reason why you shouldn't. But when it comes to reading and studying, researching into folklore and fairy tales, you would be a little ridiculous if you thought that every single fairy tale that you were reading was one, going to teach you a moral, or that they were made specifically for teaching morals.
Thank you for listening to The Fairy Tellers. If you enjoy what we're doing, please leave us a review or share us with your friends. For access to exclusive bonus content, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thefairytellers. Special thanks to Andy Forey for our music and to Clarice Inch for our artwork. And of course, a big thank you to all our patrons. Without all of you, this show wouldn't be possible.
Good stories pay little attention to cultural or linguistic frontiers. The student of story collections find themselves adrift on an ocean of stories, an ocean which is boundless, deep, and ceaseless in motion. Robert Irwin.
He stepped forward and he said, that's what he said.